Welcome to our webinar. Feel free to write in the chat option, where are you coming from? From which country are you visiting us? Hello, Portuguese people. Hello, USA, Maggie. Welcome, Maggie. Okay, it's so nice. We already have 43 people coming. Montreal, welcome. So happy to have you all here. It's going to be a great webinar. Please share with us, where are you coming from? Welcome, Portuguese. Calgary.
Hi, Don.
Oh, someone chat knows.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Aroca. I love Aroca. I'm from Porto. Oh, Felipe. I know Felipe from Aroca. Welcome, Felipe. Hello, Porto. I'm from Porto, best city in the world. Welcome. Okay, so welcome everyone. I'm sure more people will come in. England, hello, welcome. So I am sure more people will come in, but I will start into the introduction, so we don't lose any other minute. So welcome to this webinar. So this is a very cool project. A couple months ago, Chet and Hugo were talking, and well, why don't we teach Scrum and Kanban? Because it makes sense, right? So, but are there competitors or mates? Let's find out today during this 1 hour webinar. When should you use Scrum, or when should you use Kanban? So I hope you learn a lot today. Okay. So this webinar is brought to you by Agile Thinkers Academy and Hendrickson XP. So please feel free to consider us your partner for any training need, academies, consultancy services, events, and universities. We'll be happy to help you. So let me talk you about Experience Agile Conference. So this is a very special project from Agile Thinkers. And this is a 5-day conference that is happening in Lisbon between the 25 and the 29 of September. If you already know this conference, go to the website and grab your early bird ticket. If you don't know this conference, you are losing a big opportunity to learn more with Agile Masters from all over the world. So visit us at experienceagile.org and feel free to register and to see all the amazing agenda we have prepared for you. So our speakers for today, a friend, an amazing professional, Chet Hendrickson. He was the first person to sign the Agile Manifesto, so that's huge. He's also a certified Scrum trainer. He is the co-founder of Extreme Programming and also a co-founder of World Agility Forum. And also with us, a little late, I'm afraid, but I'm sure that Chet will figure a solution in case Hugo doesn't come. But Hugo Lorenzo is a little late, but he will be with us. Hugo is an executive Agile advisor. He's a trainer of DevOps, Kanban, Scrum, Safe, and Scrum at Scale. And Hugo is also the founder of Experience Agile, Agile Human Factors, and World Agility Forum. So, guys, I'm not sure. So, do we have Hugo ready? Chet, can you see?
I think he might be here.
Oh, perfect timing, Hugo. Welcome. So, people, we are ready to go. You have your Q&A button on your screen. Feel free to write there all your questions. We will be glad to answer all your questions during the webinar. So I'm happy to, I will stop sharing my screen. Hugo, is that okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Chet.
Hello. Hello.
Hello, my friend. How are you doing?
I am good. How are you? You've snuck in right under the wire, as we say. So.
Yeah, today we are at teaching also new ways of working, new ways of thinking at the university. So several bumps over the internet. So, but here I am. Welcome, everyone. Thank you, Chet. Thank you for being here.
Welcome, everyone. So a few months ago, Hugo and I were talking about things we ought to do, and because we've been doing this a fairly long time, we kind of understand the place where all the ideas we're talking about came from. And if you look back in history, you will see a couple of things came together to kind of lead us to the world we're at today. And unfortunately, along the way, we've had this sort of split. Mostly, I would guess, driven. We have an old saying in the United States, you know, that if somebody tells you it isn't the money, it's the money. And so I would imagine that things that have happened have been driven to a large extent by commercial reasons, not for practical reasons. But if you go back in time, you will discover that after the Second World War, the Japanese economy was destroyed, thanks in large part to the American economy, who made lots of airplanes and bombs and things. But we in the US felt it was a very good thing to get the Japanese economy back up and running as quickly as possible. And so we sent some really, really bright guys over there to help them. And they helped the Japanese economy get started back up again. And in process of doing that, they taught them the best things they knew. These folks came from the Harvard Business School, and they took with them some very powerful tools. And one of the most powerful tools they took with them was something called empirical process. The idea that we should make decisions by basically doing something, seeing what happens, and deciding what to do based on that. And so the Japanese companies that came back to life, Honda, Toyota, Nissan, Mitsubishi, Fuji, all these companies that you all know, incorporated this idea in ways that US companies didn't, and in ways that European companies mostly didn't. And growing out of that, we see a different way of approaching problems. And the ideas that we call Agile really blossomed in the Toyota Motors Company. The ideas that they created is where we went back to find out how to do this stuff again. And there are two things that grew out of that. And one of them was how to efficiently create products that you knew what they were going to be. The creation, the building of things. This is often referred to as the Toyota production system. And we one of the things we've stolen from that was their technique for managing how all that work happened. And this is called Kanban today. Growing up next door to that was how do you come up with new products? And it took us a little bit longer to figure that part out, but there were interesting things written about that. And that process was really where Scrum and extreme programming and the other Agile methods really popped out from. Everything except Kanban, all the other things grew out of that. And so here today, looking around at the ecology that we see in front of us, we see a divide between those two ideas. It is purely artificial. And so what Hugo and I have been thinking about and working on is how do we go back to those first principles and bring the students, to bring our participants up to a place where they just see the basic ideas and see the forces that act upon you to do one versus the other, knowing that they all have the same roots. And so that's really what we're talking about here today. And that's what we're going to be doing a class about. And with somebody who remembers when the class is will tell me hopefully a day or two before it. So,
21st of June.
the 1st of June. I'll be around. I'll be around. So that's kind of what we want to talk about a little bit here today, is give you a little what I would call a précis of that, what we're going to talk about in this process, not just as a sales pitch, but understand that we're here to make money. Guys, remember, it's about the money, but also because we think these are cool ideas and we want to make sure that you have those as well. My phone keeps pinging. I don't know if Hugo's sending me text telling me to shut up.
No, not at all. Yeah, so definitely we are going to also to answer your questions. We are going to explain where Scrum fits and what was the purpose, and Kanban. A lot of people talk about Kanban from the manufacturing, but how is it at manufacturing and all that, what comes and brings to you? What are benefits, where one it works? We don't go on the deep dive, but definitely we're going to help you to understand. So also remember, Japanese concepts, culture, it's different way in Europe, different way in the States and other places, other regions. The thing is, how can we use those principles and values to foster better the way we work? So how we work today. So those are the things. I'm going to start here with a small presentation that we have also for you to start, to open the questions and to talk a little bit about all this. So the first, I would say, what do you know about elephants? Does anyone knows anything about elephants? By the way, you can go to menti.com and use the code that is on the top of the window, right? But in fact, this is not a real question for all of you. So perhaps you don't know much about elephants. And if there is an elephant in the middle of the room, we are supposed to not talk about that. But here it comes. This is about, and Chat can peek here. So this is a famous story that Chat going to share with you guys.
Well, the idea, of course, is that you take a bunch of blindfolded folks and you walk them up to an elephant and ask them what it is. An elephant is so large and diverse, it turns out, that depending upon where you stand and what you touch, you get completely different answers. On the side, it's a wall. At a leg, it seems like a tree. At the trunk, it's a snake. The ears seem like fans, and on and on and on and on. But it turns out it's just an elephant. It's all the same elephant. It's all those things. And it just depends on where you are and how you come at it is what you see. And so this is kind of the world we're talking about, that because we have blindfolded ourselves and we look at this world of modern management, really, and project, depending upon where we stand and what we touch, we think it's something else. We think, oh, this is Scrum, this is Kanban, this is XP, this is Lean, this is whatever. When in fact, they're all the same elephant. And I think for us to go forward and to really use these ideas as they should be used, we have to understand that they're really the same thing. And we have to take our blindfold off and see that it's one elephant, and depending upon what we need, that's where we go and get and touch that part of the elephant. And so we have to come at it without these blinds, these coverings on our eyes, and actually see what is really there.
So this is our elephant today from the Agile practices. So you have Kanban, which is a method. Also with these 6 practices, you have Scrum with these 5 values, and you also have the extreme programming method. So all the methods combine well with Scrum, because Scrum, it's a framework. So it's like a road, but how you drive on that road, it's up to you and the people that are driving on the road, that journey. Where the road will take you, well, it's up to the team. The team will define where the road will take them. Sometimes we don't do a product because we didn't have the skills, but in that journey, we learn a lot of skills and we become a team. And sometimes that's also even more important than just finding a product that will make a lot of money. Of course, money is also important. We never say that. But how do you use all these practices? It's perhaps the thing that you also need to learn. All of them comes and needs from lean. Lean is quite important. So you already heard about lean. You have Muri, which is the overburden, the quantity of work that you have, but you don't say no. And then you go into analysis paralysis. So it's where when you optimize the resources first, usually you don't have any flow because your resources are well optimized, but none of them can deliver anything. So customer still waiting, but you are full of work, you are overburdened. Or when you have Muri, which is the variations. And what variations brings to you as you jump from topics to topics, from meetings to meetings, and then you go. So at the end of the day, you work more than it was, but on the product that customers are waiting, nothing comes up. And then that's the last one, which is Muda. Muda is about waste. So seven or eight types of waste. That's the silent problem, the silent cost you have in organizations. So organizations on the right side, you can say right or left, but in one hand you will have what is your revenue. On the other hand, you have what is your cost, and you try to balance all of them, and you try to make cost efficiency and performance efficiency. But in the middle, it's the silent waste. That silent waste is the end over costs, transaction costs, uh, not having the right skills to do the right thing, not having the right people to do the right thing, lack of motivation. So it's basically a problem issue, a people issue. Now, one of the things that we also want to share with you is definitely you don't need to know anything about elephants, but these methods and these practices will help you to foster in the age of agile, the digital age, essentially, right? So, saying this, Scrum or Kanban, but what is the problem you're trying to solve? What are you trying to solve here? So,
And that's important. If you don't know the problem you're trying to solve, what's your chances of being successful? If you don't know where you are and you don't know where you're trying to go, what your destination really is, then it really doesn't matter what you do. And so one thing a good organization has to do, an organization to be good has to do, is come together on a consensus as to what we're trying to achieve and how will we know we are achieving it. Without that, none of these things make any sense because you've essentially built chaos as your underpinning driver. We're just flailing around. And if that's how you're working, then success will just be more flailing. And so you can't be successful that way. You have to have a way of knowing where it is you want to go, knowing where you are starting, and understanding the terrain between where you are and where you want to get to, because all those things will impact how successful you're going to be.
So please do your questions about what problem you're trying to solve. But in the meantime, while you formulate your questions, and chat, perhaps we can also give some insights to our audience. Long time ago, when Agile movement started, Scrum was the most fashion framework, let's say. Everybody wants to use Scrum. Nothing bad, but it seems there is a huge problem with the roles. So Scrum, yeah, easy to go, 4 boxes and 2 circles. That's perfect. Now the roles, it seems whatever the roles are, people cannot do those roles in a competent in a way that complies with the Scrum values.
Well, I think look at it from even a broader standpoint. There was a time, in around the turn of the century where extreme programming actually was the most popular of the Agile methods. And it's still incredibly popular with the people who adopted it then. And it's not that XP got less popular, it's that it was surpassed by processes which looked easier to do, because XP actually required you to do things in a particular sort of way. And Scrum, because it has no practices essentially in it, can be done well or can be done poorly, but still conform more or less to the rules of Scrum. And so you saw a lot of folks take on Scrum because it looked easier than doing XP. That isn't true, because in order to be successful at Scrum, you have to be as disciplined in Scrum as you would have been in XP. And then even more than that, we see an awful lot of groups today, a lot of teams today, a lot of companies today going to Kanban, because it appears to have less structure than Scrum. Scrum got too much structure. Let's do something that doesn't have, a 2-week cycle or something. And so you see this slowly diminution of the rigor in which people take on these things. Somebody this morning actually tweeted that in America, the word Kanban means no practices at all, just doing whatever you want. And that is not true. And so to be successful with any of these methods, you actually have to understand what they are and understand how to actually go about doing them. And that requires skill and knowledge and discipline and do all those things, because there's no process that allows you to just randomly do things and be successful. That does not exist. Somebody brought us a question.
Yeah, we have a question here. So I work in an ITIL framework. The main problem I'm facing now is my process is adherence of the process by the team. I'm not sure if that's a problem we can solve using Kanban. So try to understand here the question. So they work with ITIL framework, okay? So you have service strategy, service design, service transition, service operations. Basically, most of the companies usually do more of service operations, a little bit less of the others, and sometimes also a lot of continuous service improvement. But trying to understand what is really the question is about. So my process is adherence of the process by the team. So what do you mean by this? Try to understand what is. So is they follow the process, they don't capture so more, or I was trying to understand. Chat, do you capture what?
I don't think I do. I don't think I understand that as well. Let's see here. Right now is my process is adherence to process by the team. So it sounds like their team isn't following what the ITIL framework says they should be doing. That's a kind of a global issue, regardless of whatever the framework you start with is. And so there's several things to consider in that. One of them, of course, is this framework, and I'm barely understand. I know very little about ITIL, but is this framework appropriate for the kind of work you are doing? Aha, so the team doesn't use the policies and processes always, as they found them time-consuming most of the time. Yeah, that's the problem with any largely heavily defined process, and I think ITIL is falls into that category based on what I understand of it. Where process is more important than productivity. You want to always understand in any of these situations, whether it's ITIL or any framework, what it's trying to drive at. All these things were created basically as an implementation that worked somewhere once. And the chances of your world being exactly like that is pretty slim. And so what you want to always think about is, what are they trying to achieve with these policies and practices, processes, and understand how that relates to what you're doing. It is possible that some process like Kanban might give you visibility in order to manage that work. But like I kind of said earlier, you don't want to use Kanban as a technique for reducing the amount of mindfulness people are having to take on during their work. Yeah, so the ITIL processes may be more than you need, but you certainly need something. And you might want to take a step back and say, okay, here's these set of practices. Here's these policies. What are they trying to achieve with them? It is not just adherence to the policy, adherence to the practice. There is some underlying value that we're trying to get out of that. Sometimes it's just having everybody do stuff the same way. And I've never been a big fan of that, but that doesn't mean your organization doesn't find value in that, because there are things that become easier if everybody's doing things the same way. It lets us solve problems together. It lets us have people move around and not have to relearn everything. You don't want every turn to be like walking through Disneyland, where every time you turn a corner, it's completely different. And the music's different, the colors are different, and everything's different. You want to have a cohesiveness about what you're doing. And even a place like Disneyland, there are consistent things that are true everywhere. Mickey Mouse is every place you look. But I would try to go back to first principles and understand what we're trying to achieve with these things, and then figure out how that fits into how your work should be done. So that's a big question, and I'm afraid all I can give you is rather vague answers for it from this distance.
But we have empathy for this question, because again, if you just implemented a service management system for an hospital where you have 3 million tickets already there, and that's just 1 year of work, and just like Chet said, you don't want people to at the help desk or service desk to change things around. But the thing is, everything evolves, and I understand you spend a lot of money, consulting time, implementing that system. But the thing is, your consumers changed, and now the system, it's not adaptable enough to keep the things going. So how you remove, it's like if you have a car and you want to have speed. So first, second, fifth, today there are cars with 9 gears, right? But it goes to an end that you say, I have my 9 gear, I'm going to 300 kilometers per hour. How can I go faster? Because the answer for some people is you can't. But for others is, let's look what we have in the truck. So in the trunk, what you have is, heavy things. And as soon as you remove all that heavy stuff, your car might go 350. So if your organization is stuck because now you want to evolve and it's hard to evolve, first, what do we need to evolve? Second, what is that need, where it comes from, that need? And how flexible are the systems so we do that without changing everything or need to build from the scratch? But again, sometimes that's the opportunity. Building from the scratch might give you the opportunity. Whatever you do, don't ask more than you can achieve, and think big, do it small, understand why it happens, and make it adaptable enough. So, because in a couple of years, you will need to change it again. So, Chat, you also teach that when people are doing, and you also said to me, you teach me that today we build the legacy of tomorrow. And that's why you need refactoring. Otherwise, it's basically the same thing that's happening here. In a couple of years, this system doesn't compel with our consumers. And now we want to change the consumers. We can't. Change the system. We can't. So we go to analysis paralysis mode, because it seems whatever option we ask, nobody have a right answer we want to hear. Right? So
yeah, you always have to be working at a high level of quality within your product, both internally and externally. The internal quality gives you the ability to add new features that were not originally thought of, and you want to be able to adapt. You know, like I said, you don't want to be building a legacy system. You want to be building one that can be maintained out into the future until you decide that it's time to replace it, not the implementation decides it's time to replace it. And that requires quality, and that's a thing that lots of organizations haven't quite figured out, or don't know exactly what that quality looks like. So,
yeah. So we have another question here. So we create websites for our clients, and we have always a deadline. Well, who doesn't? We
yes.
use the Scrum framework. Awesome. With this deadline, whatever it is for each project, are we using the best approach? Is perhaps Kanban better?
Well, let's take a step back for a moment. As I spoke about earlier, that there are, Scrum and Kanban are really manifestations of an underlying set of ideas. But that doesn't mean that they're interchangeable. They grew up, they diverged because they were living, well, there were more than one environment, more than one set of forces that we had to deal with. And one set of forces led us to Kanban, and another set of forces led us to Scrum and iterative Agile processes. And so the question has to always start with what exactly are the forces that are acting upon you. Now, the primary forces that we see leading us to Scrum is we need to discover some solution to a problem. And we don't know exactly what that solution is going to look like. And therefore, we have to employ an empirical process. And so the idea in Scrum is you build a thin version of your product in a very short period of time. You review that version of your product with your stakeholders, with the people who want your product, and discover how this helps them understand what they want better than they knew at the beginning. And so if you live in a world where no matter how intricately and comprehensively you have created requirements at the beginning, will those requirements still be as true on day end as they were on day beginning? And most of the stuff I do, that isn't the case. That our problem and our solution for it continues to change as we're trying to solve it. And in some ways, trying to solve it causes it to change. People learn things because you give them things to look at. One of my favorite quotes from the father of extreme programming, Kent Beck, is that nothing changes requirements like running software. If you build your website and you show it to the clients and they say, no, that isn't it, that isn't exactly what I wanted, then that's where Scrum comes into play. Because what I do then is I don't build the entire website and give it to them. I build a very thin version of the website so I can adjust enough so that I can get feedback from them about what I think their vision for their solution is and how their vision of that solution has evolved. And that's why we, at the end of every sprint, take what we've built and share it with our customers and find out what we should do differently going forward. And so if that's the kind of problem you have in your work, that's the solution you need. Now, if you mostly know exactly what it is you're going to do, they told us the website, and if we build it like that, they will be happy. And there are times where that is the case, then you don't need Scrum for that, because you don't need the iteration in order to get the feedback. And so there, Kanban works perfectly well. I know what I'm going to do. I just want to be able to manage that work in the most visible way possible. And Kanban gives us the ability to do that and reduce the amount of variation when we do that, because we've essentially created a factory for building websites. And whether it's a website for a shoe store or for a pet store, it doesn't matter. But if we're having to discover a product to sell in that shoe store or a product to sell in that pet store, Scrum might be the solution for that because we don't know exactly what that product really wants to be. And so those are the two major forces we look at. Now, one of the interesting things that happens in a Scrum process, in an iterative process, is because the world is constantly changing around us. That's the world in which you use Scrum, where the world is constantly changing. Well, you can't survive doing work in a world that's constantly changing. That's just flailing. It appears like as it is just flailing. And so what we do in Scrum and XP and the other iterative Agile processes is we make little time boxes where we freeze our vision of the world. And so even though the world is continuing to change outside of our box, inside our box, we ignore it for just a week or two. So we can actually do a piece of work. And so what happens is within that little box where we are ignoring the changes that are taking place around us, we've turned that into Kanban because that's where Kanban works, where we know what we're going to do. And so coming out of the planning meeting in Scrum or XP, we have a plan for what we're going to do. And even though the world is changing, we ignore that for just a couple of weeks and we build this thing. Otherwise, we'll be flailing. And we pop out then at the end and say, okay, we've done this. How has the world changed? And therefore, what should we do differently going on? And so it's possible that you can use Kanban for what you're doing because you know exactly what you're going to do and you don't need the feedback that comes from Scrum. It's possible that I do need the feedback from Scrum, but I might do Kanban within it to manage that work. And as another question that came up, that in addition to doing that work, I have other unplanned work. Well, then I can float all that work within the sprint into my work stream using Kanban. And so there I would have Scrum on the outside and Kanban on the inside. And those things fit together very well that way. I don't think I've ever seen anybody do the other. I don't think that doesn't make sense. But Kanban within Scrum makes a lot of sense, and it solves Robert's problem as well as your problem, I believe. So
Awesome. So thank you, Chad. That's great explanation. So I hope it can help you. And as you can see also, if you live in an environment with a lot of constraints, policies, dependencies, sometimes I go to some customers when they say, oh, here we have tests, and then we need to do acceptance tests with the customer, and then the customer will give another feedback. So it's always at the end. So the customer is not leaving the values. If the customer is not there, individuals and iterations over. So why bother? So why use Scrum? Of course, for the team, it will be nice, better communication, a lot of good things. But again, it will not bring perhaps the piece that you're looking for. So, and if you are doing, for example, 3 websites at the same time, customers are not there. And at the end, they always change contents and this and that. So again, that would be Kanban. It's a great approach. Using Scrum will bring you benefits, but mostly will put you in a place there is quite awkward. So Scrum values are not present. You have full of dependencies while it should be exactly the opposite, no dependencies. Owner should be owner of the product and not, an account manager trying to make that running off the door. So I hope all these insights can inspire you and help, because much of that will also cover in the course, where we explain how Scrum works, how Kanban works, and perhaps today you need Kanban, tomorrow you need Scrum, and then you go back to Kanban. Even a product that you start from the scratch, a new product, something that doesn't even exist, you start with Scrum. As soon as you see that, well, the new features are not bringing more value, in this case, we can even jump to Kanban, because all that exponential increments in value that Scrum is giving is not giving anymore. And so right now, we are not doing anything new. What we are just trying to keep the operation running. So Kanban is quite good for service and for operation. And Scrum, I would say, products, complex, very high complex projects when you need a lot of a network of very skilled people, That where perhaps it's good domains to work with. So another question. I have known Scrum for 10 years, but recently got to study Kanban, and I was surprised by its apparent simplicity and focus on flow. Then I bumped into Scrumban and I got confused. Well, who doesn't, right? And what's your thoughts on this? So
I think the problem with that, I'm afraid you've run into a place where the fact that there's no exact definition of Scrumban kind of impedes our ability to answer that. There is no formal definition of Scrumban. What I spoke about earlier, which is Kanban within Scrum, sometimes is referred to as Scrumban. In which case, I think that makes perfect sense. I need the feedback loops of Scrum, but I know that within the sprint, I can do Kanban because I have fixed the work I'm going to do. My constraints have changed inside the sprint as opposed to the constraints that are outside the sprint. You see other folks who do different things. There's a thing called Scrumban, which is Kanban, but using the terminology of Scrum. You have a person who controls the to-do queue and its refreshment, and they call them the product owner. And they have a person who kind of oversees how the processes work, and they call them the Scrum Master. And they call this list the backlog, and they use Scrum words any place they're close to being the right word to describe an idea. And people call that Scrumban as well. And so I think the thing that's confusing you, and it's the thing that confuses everybody, which is there's no accepted definition of Scrumban. It's just, it's anything from Scrum with Kanban on the inside to just using the words of Scrum to overlaying no process whatsoever, and we just randomly do things. And so that's one of those places where somebody says, if we want to do Scrumban, you want to say, write down what you mean by that. Show me what that is, because there's no definition of it that's agreed upon.
And Chet, I think you also touched on two things that's quite important. So a Scrum team, they have autonomy. They take decisions. So the decision-making process, it's there. Okay, they are not waiting for someone to go there and tell them what to do, because they are trying to uncover something that nobody knows how to do. Otherwise, it was already done. With Kanban, and you see that even at a Scrum team, they use Kanban more for the visibility of the team. They are very disciplined people. Okay, they are grown-ups. Chet told me one word to define extreme programming: responsible developers. People we can trust. No bugs, no saying we will do this by the end of the week, and then 5 months later they come up with something. That's not what we are expecting. So when we use Scrum, they use the Kanban. It's a method, right? It's a framework, and they use the method. Like they need to. You cannot have business agility without technical agility. So you need technical agility as well. And technical agility doesn't start with tools and DevOps tool chain or whatever. What you're looking for is to fix all that potential problems that will come with time, and that will give you flow. So doing less, it's more, right? So it's about that discipline of the team, and they use the method just to give the visibility and a good way for them when they have a discussion about the work. It's there, the work is on that board. While when you use a Kanban method, is basically we use the policies because we are guided by constraints, and those constraints are there. We don't, we pull the work, we try to have a flow, but the Kanban in itself, what we try to give the visibility is how many impediments, how many dependencies, right? So I would say Kanban is more for kind of an organization and their daily services, daily business operation, see how much waste we have and how much time we stop for meetings and this and that, how less productive we are. While in a Scrum team, we are definitely focused on one product at a time and try to make them the best product of our company. And that it's a different context, a different way of working, a different domain. And trying to have both at the same time, it might be confusing for these people. They will not understand when to jump into other or to another. Are they doing a product? Are they doing multitasking? Are they doing 5 products at the same time and giving support in the operations at the same time? That's not a good thing. That's what Scrum was not um, really about, right? So we hope we can, more of this will get you more at our course. That we'll have by June. So we here at Mentimeter, we don't have here more questions, but I'm sure we have more questions
We have
here.
a couple over here on Zoom.
Okay,
One of them here is about a startup that are doing product development plus business development and marketing and sales and all those things. And they're wondering, can I have a single vision of all that work, a view of all that work? And whether that's a reasonable thing to do or not, whether to try to have a single view of that work. I certainly understand the desire to have a single place to see all of that. And if you were to look at the commonalities between how that work is done, you might discover that some process like Kanban might allow you to show those things. So I might have a software development group who are using Scrum to develop a product, but I should be able to kind of publish where they are using a Kanban sort of approach. So I might adopt, a way of making all that work visible and where it stands, and that would look an awful lot like Kanban. It wouldn't be particularly detailed, but it would show you the relationship between all those things and whether you were on track to hit the synchronization points required to get your product done. And so I would experiment a little bit with mapping all that work, no matter how it's actually being done on the ground, into some sort of visible way of seeing where everybody is. That might generate more challenges than it's worth, but you don't know until you know. What would you do in that situation, Hugo? That's
So I definitely agree with you. So in the product development environment, if you are doing products exactly that, we are uncover, right? That's exactly what it comes from the manifesto. We are uncovering better ways of doing, and by doing and helping others to do it. So that's the thing, right? And the first principle is delighting the customer. So if you're doing something that you say, hey, customer, you're seated here, what will be the first feature, what will be the price, so what will be the thing that bring the money, something that really, what will be the first thing? And he says, well, perhaps the page about us. And you say, wow, so the page about us, how many subscribers will bring, what will be our revenue by the end of the day? Oh, nothing, but it's quite important for me. So sometimes when you go on those kind of things, between development, marketing, sales, and we have all those silos, the Scrum team might be confused because we want to deliver value. So in that case, perhaps it's better to have in the room the people that really understand what value means, make them work together, learning skills from each other, and then they say, what will be what will be the first feature when we push the button, we make a lot of money, that make customers that say, I want to buy from them. And that's the first thing we will do, even if the rest of the website don't have our location, our phone number, who we are, where we come from. Those are important things. But if you make something that people push the button every second and buy from you, that will be something quite awesome. So making all these people together in the same room and working as a Scrum team, where roles are not important. What is important is the team who what develop, and having a common understanding. So what marketing means, because marketing in digital world, it's nothing to do with the other marketing. Try to sell in the digital world. You see how hard it is and how difficult it is, right? Just not just because it's digital, it's because some people are afraid of a lot of things. Can I put my money here? And what happens if I don't like it? How can I cancel an order? Will I have my money back? What happens to my money? And if I put my credit card and the first time I push yes, buy, it says your card was refused. It's because of my card, it's because of the system. How do I know they kept my data and now I don't have nothing, but they kept my data? All these are amazing things that everybody in the team needs to understand. So a small startup, mixing product development and other business dev, the thing is, what are you trying to build? And when you do that, is the thing, go together, learn together, practice together. Okay, those are the things that are really important to all of you.
And I let me jump in here because what Hugo just said is incredibly important. And if you go all the way back to the paper in the Harvard Business Review in 1986 that described the Toyota process for developing new vehicles, this is exactly what Hugo was just talking about. Because what they said they did was they took a cross-disciplinary approach. They knew that it wasn't just designing a car or building a car or selling a car or all those things. It was all those things together. And in order to be successful, all that has to happen. And that's kind of what Robert here, the world Robert is talking about. All those things have to be successful. And if we think of them as separate things, then we're not going to have the success we should have. And so the true process from Toyota, now from Scrum, is I'm going to form a team with all the skills required to take this idea for a product and get it in a place where we can achieve value with it. And that's going to be software development and marketing and sales and all those things. And you create a team of all those folks so that we don't have handoffs. We don't need feedback loops. Now, feedback loops are short feedbacks are good, but the best approach is not needing a feedback loop, because everybody that needs to be involved in the decision making is involved in the decision making.
Yeah.
And so the feedback loop goes to zero, because the person who has to I would normally hand things off to is sitting next to me, and we don't have a handoff, we have a collaboration. And so what we're suggesting here is, don't think of these different groups as separate entities where your product idea is going to pass down the line, but think of them as a broader collaboration where we can bring everybody needed together in order to be able to solve this problem. And that's what Scrum is about, is bringing all those people together to do that. That's where it grew out of. That's where it was born. You know, back when I was involved in automobiles back many years ago, although I had very little to do with actual cars, it turns out, when I worked for auto industries. But back then they would have folks design a car, and it may take them years to do that. And then they would hand it to the manufacturing people, and the manufacturing people would say, yeah, but we can't build that. And they go back to the designers and they have to do it again, and on and on and on. So there's 4 or 5 big handoffs that could possibly make us go all the way back to the beginning and start again. And Toyota solved that by taking all those people and putting them together in what they called a Scrum. And that's where the name we use for Scrum comes from, was this idea at Toyota where we had everybody together, working together, building what we need, building the end product, not worrying about intermediates.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And every time you do that, it's not good for the team, because again, if you have other people trying to fix small things, they will never know they failed those things. They will never learn. So again, in 1 year, you just build the legacy for 20 years of things that will never end, to be more than a problem than a solution. But in the
we have
beginning,
a question about tools. I'm not a big fan of tools, but what today in a distributed world that the current environment has put us in, we often have to use some kind of tool. I would what I would want to do is experiment and look at many different ways of doing things. Look at how I can experiment with different kinds of techniques and tools as cheaply as possible and discover the one that works the way you want to work. You don't want to adopt a process because that's the tool you bought. You want to find a tool that works the way you want to work, that understands how you and your team are going to go out doing work. And so I would put the tool decision as late as possible and maximize the experiments to discover what you need and how much you need of different things, because you don't want to all of a sudden have a tool that's now changing how you work and are taking your mind off of the work you're doing in order to comply with what the tool wants. So you always want to be the boss. You want the tool to always be your servant.
Yeah, usually I say every tool are good tools if you don't spend more than 2% of your time working on them, because that stops you to work on your goals. And then you say, why 2%?
The best tool ever, a Post-it note. Even though I got them from the Project Management Institute, they're still a good idea.
They're still a good idea. Exactly.
Still a good idea. Ignore the edge, use the top. That's what you want.
Exactly. So, and sometimes people say, but why 2%? And say, well, make it 1%. It doesn't, what I'm trying to say is it should be, to don't say it must be, because that can be, oh, I don't want to be rude, but it must be the less time on tools and more on what you want to deliver.
You would prefer that all that stuff be a side effect of you actually doing your work, as opposed to a driver of how your work is done.
Exactly.
So,
okay, guys, thank you so much, chat.
Yeah, I haven't, Robert, I haven't found something better than a Post-it note on a wall yet.
Yeah.
There are some things that are close to it in the online world, but I would much prefer to be in a place where I can use Post-it notes on a wall. So yeah, nothing works better than that.
So we end up your time. So remember, get ready. Chat and I will be available for questions. It will be 6 amazing days of training. It will be half days, by the way, and we can help you a lot, for sure, with all our experiences. That's basically what we will share, stories and experience.
6 half days. My mornings, Hugo's afternoons. So folks on both sides of the ocean can participate in the class. Yeah. And hopefully one of these days we'll get to do them in the same room, on this side of the ocean and that side of the ocean.
Hopefully, yes.
So, yeah.
Hopefully, yes. Chat, good to see you again.
I'm seriously missing coming to Portugal. So
Portugal is missing you. Thank you so much, Chat, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. I have to go get my hair cut now.
Yeah, I just want to finish talking to you. So guys, book your seat today. If you want to get your certification in Scrum and in Kanban in the same course with Chet and Hugo, you can do it. You will receive a link for registering in your email tomorrow. And if you enjoy our webinars, we have a Is Agile the Future of HR webinar on May 26th. And also Business Agility through Agile Marketing on the 1st of June. So you can visit our websites. You can send an email to info@agile21.com, or you can just look at your email tomorrow with the links for registering in any of one of these moments. Thank you so much for coming. Hope to see you very soon in another Agile Thinkers webinar. Take care. Bye-bye.